Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another amazing episode on the Unleashing Potentials podcast. My name is Bernadette Desir, and I'm your host. And joining me today is special guest Danielle Shea. How are you?
I'm great, Bernadette. So happy to be here with you today. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I have so much energy. I have to tame myself. I love some Mondays. Today's a good Monday.
Yay. I love to hear that.
Yeah. Where about are you tuning in from, Danielle?
Yeah, I am in San Diego, California right now.
What's the weather?
It is a little bit gloomy. Yeah, we got
Mm.
our May gray going on today. But it'll burn off in a little bit, but it's super nice. Can't
Oh, that's good.
be mad about the weather in San Diego.
That's awesome. Yeah, so to start, can you tell us who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Danielle Shea, and thank you so much for allowing me to be here today. I'm a
Mhm.
healing coach for sexual abuse survivors and a lived experience expert. I help survivors, both male and female, all over the world, reclaim their power so that they can live joyful and fulfilled lives by developing unwavering confidence, building their support system, and setting up healthy boundaries.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. Can you take us back to your story and your experiences if it's not too raw, too much to talk about for you?
Yeah, definitely. And just for everybody who's listening, just to let you know, I will keep it very surface level. My purpose is not to trigger you today. My
Mm.
purpose is to support you and show you that healing is possible no matter what you're going through, right? Because trauma is a universal thing.
Yeah.
We all have it, and it's the spectrum is different.
Mhm.
So, my first experience with sexual trauma, I was 19. I was drugged and someone had sex with me without my consent. And that led to a lot of self-hatred. That led to a lot of disbelief because I thought it was my fault. I thought I was the one who did something wrong. I thought I had cheated on my boyfriend at the time. I apologized to my perpetrator, and it was really a whole bunch of other people, and I had so much privilege around my healing because of my support system. And it was other people who told me, like, Danielle, that's not actually, what happened. It wasn't your fault. You didn't cheat on him. Like,
Mhm.
someone took advantage of you and
Yeah.
purposely.
Yeah.
And so that led to, like I said, a lot of self-hatred, a lot of self-destructive behaviors.
Mhm.
It led me to being in, emotionally abusive relationships, and that I definitely played a role in as well, right? Like, I have been the villain in other people's stories, and I did that, trying to reclaim my power, trying to develop boundaries, trying to get my confidence back. But I was doing it in all the wrong ways, and drugs and sex and alcohol and really bad decisions. And, just like everybody, we don't have just one kind of epiphany or one turning point. We have a whole bunch of kind of micro things that lead us to our healing. And it was really my mom who was like, look, either you get help or I'm dragging your butt to go get help,
Mm.
like, and it was that deep radical love where I was like, okay, yeah, I need to get some support. So I started going to counseling and therapy. I started doing, my own deep healing and my own healing work and my own self-awareness work. And
Mhm.
now here I am living, honestly, an incredible life that I didn't think I would ever be living, because
Mhm.
at one point I was trying to take my own life, and now here I am, and I get to talk to you,
Oh,
and
wow.
I
Yeah.
get to talk to all these listeners, and I get to talk to people all over the world and help them and show them that
Mhm.
it is all what you make it.
Mm.
Even the really, really, really sucky stuff.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
And me too. And I'm sure lots of people can say me too as well.
Yeah.
Men, women, boys, and girls. It's not something that we always tap into or talk about. And
It is.
it's taboo.
And it's the taboo of the taboo. No one wants to talk about trauma, but really no one wants to talk about sexual trauma because it's
Mm,
also a crime
mm,
that is swept under the rug, that people don't
mm,
believe that it's a crime. There's all of this kind of like nuanced conversation that that certain people like to take and manipulate into a different way. There's so much societal pressures, there's so much stigma around it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, how do you even attack it? How do you even get in? Because there are barriers all around. So 100%. And I think it's such a fascinating thing. You got me going here. I think it's such
No,
a
go ahead.
fascinating thing because you're like me too. And it's like literally 95% of the people that I interact with, obviously because of the work that I do, but also just in my daily life.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone's asking the question, like, what do we do about it? How
Yeah.
do we even address it? And there, yeah, it's a difficult question to ask and it's a difficult question to answer.
Yeah, yeah, and that's why it's so hard for survivors to reach out to get help
Mhm.
because the help is not always there for them. So what's the point of sharing? They keep it in and then it's taboo again. You don't bring it up to certain people, even in the healthcare professional. Yeah, and it's there as well.
Yep.
In
Yes, it is.
every area of life, it's there. And also, obviously, there's the shame, the self-hatred that comes with what
Mhm.
happens. I've dealt with very, very similar situations. And it was more than once and very, very recent, actually, which I haven't talked about
Yeah.
because I'm not ready.
Because you're not
Right?
ready.
Yeah.
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 And you said something so important right there. You said a couple really important things that
Hmm.
it wasn't just once.
Yeah.
Me too. It wasn't just once and it wasn't by the same person.
Hmm.
And I didn't know my perpetrator, but I knew my other ones,
Mm.
and it's the way that we experience it is so different and so unique, but also
Hmm.
yes, like I see myself in your story, you can see yourself in my story.
Yeah.
And also the next part that you said was that you're not ready to talk about it. Great.
Hmm.
That right there, like keeping things to yourself can be the thing that you need to do. And I know we get on survivors of like, tell your story and go out there and change the world. And it's like, yeah,
Hmm.
maybe one day if you get there,
Hmm.
but also what do you need for your own unique healing? What's
Yeah.
accessible for you?
Hmm.
And maybe that's the only time you ever mention it ever again.
Hmm.
And what else are you doing for your healing? Because telling your story is not the only way to heal.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that we pressure survivors
Yeah.
into
Mhm.
talking when they're not ready.
Yeah, yeah. And I find that pressure in the healthcare system as well.
Mm, yeah.
Um, in my case, like I would say I'm not ready, but I was expected to be ready to open up, to share. And also, I think healing starts with us. That's why my logo of my podcast is healing together. I didn't say healing alone
Yeah.
because it takes all of us to heal together. It's a chain reaction. When one of us hurt, all of us hurt. If you don't see it, believe me, go to the victim's home, their family, how they, the behavior and how they connect, and it impacts the family members. What are your thoughts?
1,000,000%. It affects everybody. They say, like depression affects not just the person who's experiencing it or suicide. It doesn't just affect that person, it affects everybody.
Hmm.
And, I said before, I had a lot of privilege in my healing because I did have a really strong, healthy support system who believed me.
Hmm.
Most people don't have that.
Yeah.
And because they believed me, it destroyed them because I was someone that they cared about.
Hmm.
And I was someone that they loved so deeply that they're like, I can't even imagine that this could happen to you,
Yeah.
And that I think that we don't often talk enough about
Mhm.
the other people that it affects. And then they are also not given the tools and strategies to be able to support the survivors or the victims or the thrivers, whatever term that you want to identify with.
Mhm,
Because
mhm,
it's like, what do you say? Because you do think that you're going to say all the wrong things
mhm, mhm.
because there's not a manual to go through this.
No, nope, there isn't. Yeah. So how can we lovingly empower survivors and hear survivors so they can
Yeah.
come forward and actually receive the help that they need?
Yeah. Ooh, such a good question. So the first thing that I ask, the advocates
Mm-hmm.
or the loved ones of survivors is, how are you creating safe spaces?
Mm.
And this is a safe space, like, are you a safe space for the survivor to even come and tell you that they had a bad day? Like in general, like not even trauma related?
Yeah.
And if not, they're not going to feel supported and
Mm-hmm.
empowered to come to you. So are you creating safe spaces for your loved ones or for the people in your community or for your clients if you're a counselor or a therapist, or if you're a lawmaker, or if you're in law enforcement, or if you're a nurse or a doctor, are you creating a safe space for this person to be able to open up? And if
Mm-hmm.
the answer is no, then it's not going to happen,
Yeah.
because we already believe that we're worthless. We already believe that we are just the scum of the earth, because that must be true because someone was able to do this to us.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it is terrifying to go up, because what is the repercussions that are going to happen? We don't want this to happen again. So we
Mm-hmm.
start putting up all these barriers.
Yeah.
Um, so are you creating a safe space? That's the first question that I would ask. And then just some language that I like to give advocates, because they're often very concerned of, like, what are the things, like, what do I even say?
Yeah.
I believe you. That's the first thing out of your mouth. I believe you.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing out of your mouth is, thank you for being brave enough
Mm-hmm.
to share this vulnerable piece of your story with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because what you've done is you've identified their courage. You've identified that sucks. This is not a fun conversation to have.
Yeah.
And you've identified that you are taking the gravity of that situation very seriously.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that can often be enough. You don't have to have all the tools, you don't have to have all the resources. There are people like myself who exist who have tools and resources for you,
Mm-hmm.
but show up imperfectly. You're going to mess it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Show up in any way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's what I always say to lots of different people, depends on what they share, is I believe you.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's all they need to hear. Especially, let's say it happens when they were young. It happened with family members that silenced them. Who believe them? Who believe kids? Which is so damaging to not only them, but the impact they're going to make in the world and people around them. Yeah, it's very damaging.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
And there isn't necessarily a right answer, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
we're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to show up, but are you showing up? Are you showing up as yourself authentically? And then are you taking accountability? Like,
Mm.
people who've been through this, are you taking accountability for your own healing?
Yeah.
People who are supporting other people, like, are you taking accountability for the words that you've said? Are
Mm.
you self-reflecting and going, if a survivor comes to you and says that was really damaging what you said, are you going, wow,
Yeah.
okay, what can I do better next time?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just this back and forth, this empathy and this compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we get really defensive when we do things incorrectly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is what blocks a lot of healing as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Yeah.
Whether it's in relationship, like you said, healing together,
Mm-hmm.
or with yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. How have you had to heal? What did you do, and how do you continue to heal to do the work that you're doing?
Yeah. So many things, right? And it's constant. People who say, like, oh, I'm healed, like, they're lying to you. We're always growing, we're always
Yeah.
evolving.
Yeah.
And I've healed certain parts of myself
Mm.
for sure, but also you can only heal what is ready to show up. So,
Mm.
like, they might heal like this outside layer, and then that peels off, and then there's another one that's ready to come up and ready to grow and evolve, and you're going to level up, and every level up is going to be terrifying and scary, because safety means, or familiarity means safety and security.
Mhm. Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, so many things that I've had to do to heal. A big part of it in my deep healing, that's what I call it. When I was just depressed and drinking and doing drugs and having sex with all the people, was talking to somebody.
Mhm.
An outside perspective. Talk therapy was so important for
Yeah.
me. It's not something that I do anymore. I did 7 years of a lot of therapy, and then a little bit on and off. But I have the tools now, and I go and do that. So my therapy looks different. My therapy looks like walks on the beach, going in the ocean,
Mhm.
taking a bath. It looks a lot more like physical care
Yeah.
than mental and emotional care. And not that I'm not doing those things,
Yeah.
right? But when I was going through my deep healing, I literally didn't care what happened to my body. And so I had to unlearn that behavior. And that was a lot of mental and emotional growth.
Mhm.
Um, and so now I do a lot of journaling. An
Mm.
emotion comes up. Where did that come from?
Yeah.
Why is this here?
Yeah.
Um, I do meditation, and I'm a meditation and mindfulness practitioner.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
breathing is huge, and really taking care of myself as a physical entity and
Mm.
incorporating all aspects of myself.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really important, is like when you're going through your healing, you might have to just focus on one. Like you might just be, your physical self. You might just be your mental self. But when you get to that real healing is with that integration. And there's so much talk about somatic healing and really tapping into the body intelligence and how do you go about and do those things.
Mhm.
And everyone heals differently.
Yeah.
This is my path, and it looks vastly different from every single one of my clients.
Yeah.
It looks vastly different from all of my friends.
Mhm.
um
Mhm.
yeah, I
Yeah.
also think trauma, it brings up a lot of different things that maybe you didn't have before. Like, I have had a difficult relationship with food.
Mm.
That wasn't something that I ever had as a kid. It wasn't something that I had when I was going through my deep healing. But when I clicked over to like, oh, like I'm actually like life is good. I'm doing pretty well. Then that the eating thing became an issue. And so it was like, okay, what is this bringing up? How is this in relationship to my perception of myself and my body as well?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. How do you bring people back to the body? Because when we experience so much intense trauma, we leave our body. How do you
Yeah.
bring people back? I'm still learning to come back to my body.
Yeah. That awareness right there, that I'm still learning to do that, that's huge. Like, do you even recognize the fact that you are disconnected from your body? And you're
Mhm.
so right, Bernadette. That's the very first thing that happens, is
Yeah.
that boom, disconnect from your body. And I tell people all the time, I was like, I don't live there anymore.
Mm.
Like, no, I don't want to, no,
Yeah.
gross.
Yeah.
And you have to be so intentional about it. And it's uncomfortable, to
Yeah.
say the least.
Yeah.
There's a study that was done that like most women can't look at themselves naked in the mirror for more than 30
Mm.
seconds, 45 seconds.
Mhm. Mhm.
And at least without like not becoming so disgusted with themselves. And that has
Mhm.
so many societal implications, but especially when you've been through this type of trauma and you're like, get me away from myself,
Mhm.
you really have to make it a practice, and it's not going to feel sexy and it's not going to feel fun.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
but then it becomes sexy, then it
Mhm.
becomes fun.
Yeah.
So a big thing is like tapping into breathing, tapping into meditation. Like, can you just put your hand on
Mhm.
your heart, feel your heart beating, like just become very aware of the different parts of your body,
Mhm.
and sitting with yourself, understanding yourself.
Yeah.
And it starts with very basic level things.
Mm.
But one of my favorite practices is, I call it the self adoration practice. And
Mm.
this is like body love 2.0.
Yeah.
Um, and so what I have my clients do is like either right before they get in the shower or right before they're going to go to bed, is you can have all your clothes on. Don't care. This is not a sexual thing.
Mhm.
but just lightly touch every surface of your body. I'm talking behind the ears, in the ear, under the
Mhm.
eyebrows, in between the toes. Like I'm talking every part of your body. Just
Yeah.
very lightly, lovingly touching yourself and saying, I love myself over and over and over and over again. And
Mhm.
it's going to feel weird and it's going to feel
Yeah.
silly and you're going to
Yeah.
hate it. And
Yeah.
then one day after doing it for a week, you're going to be
Mhm.
like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
every single piece that you do in your healing,
Mhm.
it's going to feel weird and silly and stupid when you first try it.
Mhm.
And then you're not even gonna notice the changes that are happening until you're like
Mhm. Mhm.
not triggered by something that you once were, or until you like journal about something and you're like, oh, okay. Or someone else points it out, like, wow, you seem really confident today.
Mhm.
Because it's all those little tiny changes that make healing happen. It's never going to be like an overnight thing. So my
Yeah.
self-adoration practice, I do it myself and my clients have really good results with it as well.
Mm. Yeah, that's awesome. I think I've had to do that and give myself hugs.
Yes.
I've done different types of therapy. They do different things.
Yeah.
And meditation, which I've been doing for quite a bit now, and it does help. It helps a lot. Another topic that's coming to mind as I'm thinking about it, my heart just dropped in sync, and it's sad that people fall out of love of who they are after those situations and things happen. They become almost enemy with love, even though they know the word exists. They've experienced it to an extent, but
Mhm.
they don't love themselves. They don't know how anymore. They don't have a path or the way to do it because that was robbed from them.
Yeah.
How can people love themselves when they've experienced those kind of traumas?
Yeah. Ugh. Yeah. My heart too. And
Mhm.
even a more difficult question to answer is people who've experienced this as a child, how
Mhm.
do they learn to love themselves?
Yeah,
Because a lot of people, we put trauma as like the before and the after,
yeah,
right? Like, oh, after my trauma, I was this way. And
yeah,
I had that privilege too, because I was 18,
yeah.
had a whole life ahead of me that I had,
Mhm.
or I had a whole life behind me
Yeah.
where I did have a before and after, but people who've experienced this pre-verbal, people who've experienced this when they were young,
Mhm.
it's an even harder question to ask because I think a lot of times we tell people like, oh, well, go back and look at the things that you used to do when you were little.
Mm.
You're like, well, when I was little, I had experienced this trauma. So what do you mean? um, Not to throw a wrench, into that
Yeah.
conversation and make this a sadder topic, but it's true, right? And so I think that that's an important thing to address when we're going about and answering this question.
Mhm.
Um, I think a big part is kind of what we talked about before. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes in your life. You're going to make mistakes on the things that you think that you find enjoyable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I think a big part of this trauma as well is the fear of life and living.
Mm.
Because if you trusted someone and then you were taken advantage of, can you ever trust anyone else again? And can you trust yourself to even make good decisions?
Mhm.
So this goes back with connecting to your body.
Mhm.
Do you trust your body's intelligence? How do you start building that connection?
Mhm.
And that starts with, again, very simple things like going for a walk every day. Are
Mm.
you actually doing deep belly breaths? Are you drinking enough water? Are you getting enough sleep and taking yourself as a basic human being?
Yeah.
And then starting to add in different layers when they feel accessible for you to do so. So maybe a layer is that self-adoration practice. Maybe a layer is journaling. Maybe a layer is telling your story.
Mhm.
And then figuring out what you think is fun. What
Yeah.
do you think is fun? Not what society
Mhm.
thinks is fun. You know what I think is
Yeah.
fun? Sitting and reading a book, just binge reading a book. I think that's so enjoyable. I know
Yeah.
so many people who hate reading. So if I let their perception of my idea of fun
Mm.
cloud the way I experience my life,
Yeah.
that's going to affect the way that I experience my life and that I experience my own self-love.
Mhm.
Um, So yeah, finding what are the things that you find enjoyable, what are the things that you think are fun, and then beginning to build that trust with yourself.
Yeah.
And the trust piece, I think, is where the love lives.
Mm.
Because I don't think that we allow ourselves to feel the love that we can provide to ourselves
Mhm.
if we don't think that we are making good decisions.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Thank you for sharing. What would you say to partners who have partners who've
Yeah.
faced those type of traumas? Because, sex may be awkward. They may not have it as much. They may reject it, or maybe they're angry and they just lash out, and you're like, what just happened? Did I do something wrong? And it builds insecurities in those partners when really they've done nothing wrong. The person
Yeah.
hasn't dealt with the traumas and they touch a place that really triggers something. What would you say to them?
We could have a whole episode just on this question.
Yeah.
So as someone who has been in very loving relationships and not so loving relationships outside of this
Mm,
trauma, communication is huge.
yeah.
And there's going to become a point in time when you are in a relationship with someone where you do need to ask yourself, do I love this person or like this person enough to be honest with them about my
Mm,
trauma?
mhm,
So I had a very wonderful past long-term relationship, and
mhm,
we started dating maybe like 2 years after my trauma had happened. And
mhm,
we were maybe like a month in before I was like, okay, I think I need to tell you because I noticed that I am going to be in a depressive episode for the next 2 months.
yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
just so you know that this has nothing to do with you, I need to tell you this. But we also had built the rapport, we had built the trust for me to be able to share that with him and him be able to hold space for me.
Mhm,
And it allowed us to have a much different relationship than if I would have kept that from him
yeah.
because I was able to say, when I'm sad, I just need you to hold me. Like when I'm sad, I don't need you to fix it. Like I am working through it.
Mhm,
I
yeah.
just need
Mhm,
proximity, right?
yeah. Yeah.
And we're not even talking about sex yet. Like we are just talking about rapport and trust building. Do you like each other? Like do you have a
Mm,
relationship where you can share this with somebody?
yeah.
Um, and the answer might be no. And if the answer to that question is no, then are you ready to have a sexual and physical relationship with this person?
Mm,
I think that we often say, okay, well, because I've experienced this, then I should just be able to have sex, or that's at least the perception, right?
mhm,
And we make sex mandatory when it is not. It is
mm,
just the nice little cherry on top that we get to experience with someone, and it should be pleasurable for all parties. There should be
yeah.
open communication and conversation about it. And you should be able to have the conversation of, I like this, I don't like this. And if you can't have those conversations,
Mm,
then again, I point you back to my previous question is, are you
mhm,
ready to have a physical, intimate relationship with this person?
yeah.
And it is okay if the answer is no.
Yeah, yeah. And it's tough because it's hard to deal with any types of rejection.
Yeah.
And I don't know, from experience, friendship is hard. Family relationship is hard. I was just angry at the world. I didn't care who, what, where. I was like, nope. And putting that shield and barrier up, I'm not getting hurt anymore. Not by you, not by them, not by them. No. So the door's locked, right? How can we work on ourselves while the door's locked to come out healthy? Because it's not easy, it's tough.
It's not. And with any kind of thing that you experience in life, you're going to go through the cycle of grief.
Yeah.
Experiencing this kind of trauma is like going through the cycle of grief tenfold because you've
Mhm.
lost a part of your innocence, even if it happened to you when you were an adult, right? Like
Yeah.
you lost a part of your innocence. you lost a part of your perception of the world.
Yeah.
Maybe you lost the part of the ability to think that you can keep yourself safe or that other people are going to. So there's lots of different grief cycles that you go through.
Yeah.
I think a big piece of it is allowing yourself to actually go through them. A lot of times society tells us just to get over it.
Yeah.
And even if someone dies, right? Maybe you're allowed to grieve them on their death anniversary.
Mm.
And there's some cultures where they have full celebrations every year.
Yeah.
And they allow themselves to grieve and have and hold space for that. You might not be in a culture that allows you to do that. And it's just like, get over it, go to work tomorrow. And so allowing yourself to go through those emotions of grief, you're gonna be pissed.
Yeah.
So move through that. Allow yourself to be angry. Anger is a beautiful emotion. I love anger because it's an action emotion.
Yeah.
It's when it gets out of hand or out of control, or you feel like it's uncontrolled and you start taking it out on yourself or others, that's where it becomes an issue. There's great ways to take out anger. Go hit a pillow, go scream in a pillow, stomp your feet on the ground, take up martial arts. Heck, I do kung fu. That's really great. And guess what? People get to punch me and I get to punch them and we have a great time and we smile and laugh afterwards. But we also get to like hit a bag and just get all the anger out.
Yeah.
And that makes me a nicer, more enjoyable human to be around because I've allowed myself to experience that emotion.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And I appreciate that you help men as well.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we focus on the women.
Yeah.
Men, they suffer differently than women.
Yeah.
We're explosive bombs and we just blow wherever, right? Men, they're more quiet. They die on the inside. They're quiet and then they explode, but it's a bit late when they do. It's too
Yeah.
late for everybody when they do. How do you
Correct.
help men?
Yeah. So I actually did not plan on it. I didn't think that I was creating a safe space for them to feel safe enough to come and want to share their story with me. And boy, oh boy, was I wrong. And I'm so honored when I have a male come into my DMs or come into my email or whatever and tell me like, I've never told this to anybody before. Like, thank you for the content that you're making. Thank you for the story that you're sharing. And it's the first time for both male and female survivors. It's the first time that for many people that they've ever told their story.
Wow.
And I think that you're definitely right, right? And we're generalizing here with gender and everything, but I think you're definitely right of, women, we have so much emotional privilege. And what I mean by that is that we are allowed to feel every emotion except anger.
Mm.
Society says feminine rage, we don't have room for that. Meanwhile, we're like, burn it down. Okay. Have to actively not be a villain. Okay. And men, they are only allowed to experience anger. So with men, a lot of the things that I do is giving them permission to feel their feelings, helping them understand that being emotional is not the opposite of being logical. And in fact, if you actually allowed yourself to work through these emotions, experience compassion and empathy, that's going to aid to your logic because all human beings, we are emotional creatures. And yeah, I'm going to put a pin in that and not go on my soapbox there. But, allowing them to see that also being emotional is not the end of the world. And it, in fact, is the opening of a new world. It's not a detriment to their masculinity.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the things that we work with is, I help people. One of the first things that we do is understanding their trauma response. What is their trauma response trying to tell them? And I have a lot of men tell me like, oh, fight is my trauma response. I want to get in there and I just want to like pummel it. And we unpack it and I'm like, oh, sweet, sweet baby. Your trauma response is actually flight that is being hidden under fight or
Yeah.
your trauma response is actually fawn or freeze, and you are in a fully different nervous system, when you are dealing with those things.
Mhm.
And allowing them to have the language and some context for how they're experiencing things, because we are all whole and we are all allowed to experience the whole gamut of emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you'd like to share?
Um, yeah, like I said before, I was like, if you let me talk for 3 hours, I will.
Yeah.
There's so many things and you asked such beautiful and important questions. So thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for that, Bernadette.
Yeah.
The thing that I just want to really kind of highlight, I guess, from our conversation is there's no right way to heal.
Mm.
Find what feels accessible for your own healing. When you listen to experts or when you listen to podcasts and you hear people tell their experiences from their own story, know that it's from their own story and it might not fit into yours.
Yeah.
So what are the things that you can do for you? And start really getting curious with yourself about what that's going to look like.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I have two questions for you as we wrap up.
Yeah.
The first one is, what is the meaning of life for you?
Oh, I think it changes a lot. I think it changes on the season that I'm in.
Mhm.
I don't know about the meaning of life, but
Mhm.
I think one of the purposes of life is experience as much as you can.
Yeah.
Have fun. Don't take
Mhm.
it too seriously.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Last question. Where can my listeners listen to your podcast? Because you have a podcast. Quickly, what is it called?
It's called very creatively the Danielle Shea podcast. You can
Yeah.
find me anywhere you listen to podcasts. It's also on YouTube.
Mhm.
And you can connect with me on Instagram at Danielle Shea blog. That's at DANIELLESHEABOLG.
Mhm. Awesome. Last question. Leave us with something to sit with us, to marinate in, and just to get out of it, something out of it.
Something out of anything. Yeah.
Yeah, anything, something.
Get up, go for a walk, get yourself outside. If it is safe and accessible for you to do so, go outside this second.
Mm. Nature is so beautiful. It heals. I love
Yeah.
it. I love being out. Yeah, yeah. Well, Danielle, thank you so much for your time. I honor and treasure your story and the stories and the lives that you're changing. Come back on the podcast anytime and keep shining bright.
Thank you, Bernadette. Thank you for your space and holding space for this conversation.
Always. Thank you. Okay, bye.